What's going on, everybody? This is Anthony here with the MMA Tirade, and my topic today is a co-main event fight for UFC 229, and that will be Anthony Pettis versus Tony Ferguson. And this fight is the fight before the Khabib-McGregor fight, and this fight is a real treat before that fight. And even though they're not promoting this fight the way I think they should, it's not getting enough buzz, it's not getting enough attention, especially with how skilled both these fighters are. I mean, Anthony Pettis, let's just talk about Anthony Pettis real quick. Anthony Pettis, the last WEC lightweight champion, one of the only guys to finish Benson Henderson in the first round via submission, the Showtime kick, all that stuff, submitting Gilbert Melendez, all these accolades in his career. Anthony Pettis, in my opinion, could be the best lightweight fighter in the world. Seriously, he could be the best lightweight fighter in the world, in my opinion. If everything goes right with his camp and his personal life, whatever the hell's going on, I truly believe Anthony Pettis could be the best. He could knock you out, and he could submit you, and he could do everything in between. Now, he's got some holes in his game, which every fighter does, and, you know, sometimes those holes get exploited. His move down to 145, I don't think that was a smart move for him. I think it was just, you know, at the time, he was tapped out at 55, not literally, but just, you know, there was nothing for him at 55, so going down to 45. And he had a good fight at 45. He also tapped out Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira is a very respected Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And that's a real key thing here with this fight between Tony and Pettis, is that, you know, a lot of people might think Tony has the advantage on the ground if it goes to the mat, and Pettis will have the advantage on the feet. Well, it's not as cut and dry as that, and I'm going to talk about that later down the line in the podcast. But yeah, Anthony Pettis. We all know Anthony Pettis, you know, came back up to lightweight, fought Jim Miller, beat Jim Miller, then fought Dustin Poirier, and I don't know what happened in that fight, but he didn't look the same. Not taking anything away from Dustin Poirier, but Pettis didn't look the same, and Poirier got the submission win in that fight. I think Pettis broke his rib. Something happened, or maybe that was part of the body lock submission. I don't know, but did not look great in that fight. But then comes back at UFC 226, and pretty much just destroys Michael Chiesa. Very good showing. So, I mean, he handled Jim Miller, and he pretty much handled fucking Michael Chiesa. Submitted him with a triangle, armbar triangle, something like that, at UFC 226. So, Anthony Pettis seems like he's on some type of resurgence at this point. Let's talk about Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, you know, let's go over his accolades real quick. You know, I think he was like a Division I wrestler, wherever college he came from. Won the Ultimate Fighter back in 2011. Has only had one loss in the UFC, and that was a loss to Michael Johnson, I believe. And I think he broke his arm in that fight. But besides Michael Johnson, he's won every single fight. Had some close fights, but won every single fight. And 10-fight win streak. He's the boogeyman of the lightweight division, other than Khabib. And we're going to find out how real Khabib is come October 6th. But Tony Ferguson, he's the boogeyman in this division. He really is. And he's on a 10-fight win streak, and he just looks pretty unstoppable out there. He's pulling wins out of nowhere. The Kevin Lee fight, I thought he was getting his ass whooped in that fight for the most part. I mean, it was a good back and forth for the most part, but I thought Kevin Lee was going to become the interim champ, which was very interesting. But again, Tony Ferguson weathers whatever storm Kevin Lee brought at him and submitted Kevin Lee. That was Tony Ferguson's last fight. He was scheduled to fight Khabib, and all that shit happened where he tore the ligament off his bone. And that's another point I want to get to here, is that he got injured back in April. He was supposed to fight Khabib when Khabib fought Iaquinta. That's Khabib's last fight. Well, he's back for this fight, so he could have fought Khabib. They could have rescheduled that fight for October this year, and he could have fought Khabib. Didn't happen that way, but that just shows you what a freak of nature Tony Ferguson is. Dude snaps a ligament off his fucking bone and is back in, I don't even know what, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, like 6 months, 6 months, whatever the fuck it is. He probably had his surgery in fucking May, so it's probably 5 months, and he's scheduled to fight one of the best lightweight fighters MMA has ever seen, in Anthony Pettis. I mean, he's a Showtime kick guy. I don't think anyone kicks as quick as him either. Like, I know Barbosa has some quick ass kicks, and so does Thompson, but I don't think anyone fucking throws kicks the way Anthony Pettis does. It looks like there's just a different speed, there's a different technique, something's going on with Anthony Pettis. He's one of the best. So is Tony Ferguson. That's what makes this fight great. Let's I want to talk about, before I get into the breakdown, I want to talk about their submission game. Now, on paper, they both have the same amount of submission wins. They both have 8 submission wins. And when you look at it, it's like, okay, both submission wins, but I'd still give it to Ferguson on the floor. I wouldn't even go that far. Like I said, like I mentioned earlier, Anthony Pettis, he has tapped guys like Benson Henderson, guys like Gilbert Melendez, guys like Charles Oliveira, Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa is a badass grappler too. Gilbert Melendez is a Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And Cesar Gracie don't hand out black belts like candy. Like, it's hard to get one from him. He is just on another level with his ground game, and it's an overlooked part of his game, to me, in my opinion. I think everyone just, when they think of Anthony Pettis, they think of Taekwondo and the Showtime kick. But I think they forget about how good he is on the floor. So yeah, Anthony Pettis has 8 submission wins in his career. Tony Ferguson has 8 submission wins in his career. And Tony Ferguson, to me, is a little bit more consistent with those submission wins. You know, a submission here, submission there, submission here. You know, like strings together about 3 submissions, you know, continuously, and then has a decision, whatever the fuck. But he's more consistent with his submissions as of lately. But what that tells me is that is a big part of Tony Ferguson's game, is his submission game. And with Pettis, that's a secondary version of his game. That's in my opinion. Because when I see Pettis finishing these guys with submissions, he's catching them. These guys are trying to wrestle with Anthony Pettis because I think they see the hole in Anthony Pettis' game with the wrestling. So they're going to try and grapple with his ass, try to avoid those crazy strikes, but then get caught in a submission. That's what it tells me when I'm looking at their record and when I've seen them fight. Tony Ferguson's always looking for a finish. Doesn't matter if it's a knockout, submission, whatever. Pettis is at the same time, but I feel like he's more trying to control the fight for his style. Obviously, that's a broad statement, but I feel like he's trying to control the fight so he can work his Taekwondo shit in and use that Jiu-Jitsu game as his absolute backup. And it's worked well for him. And it seems like where he's really lost fights, like the Dos Anjos fight or the Eddie Alvarez fight, or even the Poirier fight, it's when guys mix it up with him. Prime example, in my opinion, was Rafael Dos Anjos. Rafael Dos Anjos straight mauled fucking Anthony Pettis for 5 fucking rounds and took the belt from him. Straight mauled Anthony Pettis. But at the same time, the end of the fucking 5th round, to the last fucking second, Anthony Pettis was trying to throw up submissions off his back. He was always looking for those submissions in that fight with RDA. You go back a fight with Gilbert Melendez, his first title defense. Gilbert Melendez, in the 1st and 2nd round, was trying to wrestle Anthony Pettis. And what that tells me is that these guys are seeing a hole in Anthony Pettis' game where, okay, if I mix it up with this guy and I incorporate some wrestling in with my strikes and everything else, I can beat Anthony Pettis. And that's true for the most part. But as we saw in the Gilbert Melendez fight, I think Gil got too comfortable trying to wrestle with Pettis and maybe too comfortable with his jiu-jitsu game. He's like, okay, I'll just handle Pettis up against the fence. But Pettis cinched up that fucking guillotine, and I was surprised when he cinched up that guillotine. Like, he just tapped Gilbert Melendez. Like, who does that? It's insane. But yeah, he did that. Not to mention his first fight into the UFC. I think a lot of people forget that when Anthony Pettis first got in the UFC, he was supposed to unify a title. He was supposed to unify a title between the winner of Gray Maynard and Frankie Edgar. Well, that's when Gray Maynard and Frankie Edgar had that crazy-ass fight on New Year's Day where it went to a draw. And, that fight happened. Everyone knows what happened with that fight. Went to a draw, crazy fight, whatever. That fight happened like about 7-8 months down the line that same year. I believe it was 2011. And but in the meantime, Pettis has to take a fight. So he took Clay Guida. And Clay Guida exposed that hole to the whole world, to the whole MMA world when that fight happened. It's like, oh, okay. Because at the time, everyone was on Anthony Pettis' nuts. He just came off the Showtime kick. Anthony Pettis just came off the Showtime kick. So everyone was just waiting to see who they're going to match, who's going to fight Pettis for that crazy-ass fight. And then he gets matched up with Clay Guida, and all that hype gets shut down with Clay Guida's wrestling pedigree. So if there's one thing we do know, and I'm sure Pettis has worked on it, and it really blows my mind because he trains with guys like Tyron Woodley, great wrestler, guys like Ben Askren, great wrestler. Ben Askren, undefeated MMA fighter who's never fought in the UFC, but nonetheless, very impressive. He trains with guys like that, but Pettis' opponents are still able to find that hole in the fight. But and I'm not taking anything away from Pettis. I know he trains hard, all that stuff, but it seems like guys keep trying to find that hole in his game, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. But Yeah, I mean, against Chiesa wasn't able to get any of that shit off, and I don't think Chiesa even really had a chance in that fight against Pettis. But it showed that Pettis is on a resurgence because he was able to finish a top 5 guy, top 10 guy. I don't know what Chiesa is or was, but I know he's flirting with the top 5, which is weird. But yeah, that is Anthony Pettis, and that is Anthony Pettis' submission game. My point with this pre-fight analysis and breakdown is to say Anthony Pettis can finish this fight at any time. More so with his submission game. Tony Ferguson can finish this fight at any time with just how unpredictable he is and how dynamic he is. And to be honest, guys, this is real ninja shit here. I mean, Nate Diaz wants to talk about some ninja shit. Fucking Anthony Pettis and Tony Ferguson are doing real ninja shit. Like, real ninja shit. Like, it's for fucking real. Like, this fight excites me so much. Like I said, this fight is a real treat before the McGregor-Khabib fight, and I hope to God that whoever wins this fight between Pettis and Ferguson fights the winner of Khabib-McGregor next, because that's only right. But the implications of this fight all hang in the balance of what happens with the Khabib-McGregor fight and the Nate and Dustin fight on November 3rd at MSG. It really all hangs in the balance of those two things. If Conor wins, I don't see him wanting to fight Pettis or Ferguson. I see him wanting to do Nate or Dustin again. Definitely do Nate again. I'm down to see that. If you're going to skip Pettis or Ferguson for Nate 3, and if Nate beats Poirier, I want to see that fight. But after that, you should be fighting the winner of Pettis or Ferguson, because it's only deserving. Especially for Tony Ferguson. Anthony Pettis, if he beats Tony Ferguson, that'll make a huge statement, and that'll crush Tony Ferguson's hype. And I've been watching the pre-fight interviews from, all these fighters, and one thing that Anthony Pettis said that I agreed with Tony Ferguson. I'm not taking anything away from Tony Ferguson, but this is coming from Anthony Pettis, and I agree with it. When you look at Ferguson's record versus Pettis' record, Pettis has a lot more better-looking resume than Tony Ferguson. I'm not saying that Ferguson don't have good guys in his record, but a lot of the guys he submitted were guys, stylistically, that's where he could beat them. With Anthony Pettis, when he's fighting guys like Benson Henderson or Gilbert Melendez or Charles Oliveira at featherweight, he's not picked to win that fight by submission. He's picked to win that fight by striking. But no, he wins by submission. Guys he's not supposed to beat by submission. And he's gained experience, even those losses with the Max Holloway fight. He had a title shot at featherweight. A lot of people seem to forget that. I forgot it, I'm not going to lie, but a lot of other people forget that. But at the same time, when that was happening, I didn't think it was a good move for Pettis to fight Holloway. I think he was just draining himself too much. He's a big dude. Just to cut to 55, I think is a bit taxing for him. But I'm glad to see him back at lightweight, and I'm glad to see Ferguson and Pettis go at it. And if Ferguson wins, it's gonna solidify that he was the real interim champion and just got his fucking ligament torn. And if Pettis wins, that means he's on a real resurgence, and everyone should be fucking worried. Because like I said, I truly believe that Anthony Pettis could be the best lightweight in the world, maybe of all time, even more than Conor, if everything goes right with him. Because he has a crazy submission game that is proven, that's bona fide. And he has a crazy taekwondo game, striking game, that is just on another level, more than anyone else in the fucking UFC. Other than maybe Yair Rodriguez with his taekwondo. But I think Pettis has better taekwondo than Yair Rodriguez, but who the fuck am I to say anything like that? But anyway, this fight is great. This fight's exciting. Like I said, I'm trying not to pick a winner of this fight, but I will say that this is going to be a real fight. It's going to be a real treat. It will not be a boring fight. I can guarantee you that. So let me get into the analysis and breakdown part, I guess, if I haven't done it already. Where I think this fight will be won and lost will be in the grappling exchanges. It's a broad statement, I know, but in any grappling exchange, Tony Ferguson can pull some shit off, and Anthony Pettis can pull some shit off. They both can, and they're both scramblers, and they're both always looking for a finish. But I truly believe it's going to be that the fight will be won and lost with either fighter in the grappling exchanges. I think Pettis can, if Ferguson gets too comfortable, I think Pettis can just wrap him up and cinch up something and just shock everybody. Which it shouldn't shock people, but it will shock people. If Pettis taps Tony Ferguson, it'll shock everybody, including myself. Even though it shouldn't shock me. Like I said, I just named off notable names on people who he has submitted. It shouldn't shock people, but it will. That's where I see Anthony Pettis really winning this fight. Or maybe catching Tony with a head kick if he goes low first. But everyone knows about the myth in MMA. If a kicker's fighting a wrestler, most likely if the kicker kicks the wrestler's going to take him down and he's fucked. And that's where Anthony Pettis has had his issues in the past, is in the wrestling department, when guys mix it up with him. And Tony Ferguson, from what I've seen, is perfect at that. He's perfect at mixing it up and making it unpredictable. Look at the fight with RDA. I mean, to me, that was almost like a masterclass in just being unpredictable and just being dynamic and just showcasing his skills against a former bona fide lightweight champion. Seriously. And guess what? Tony Ferguson beat RDA, and RDA took the belt from Anthony Pettis. When Ferguson and RDA fought, RDA was no longer the champ. I think he just came off that loss, coming off of Eddie Alvarez knocking him out. But nonetheless, that just shows where Tony Ferguson's at. But it also shows that MMA math don't work. MMA math don't work in MMA. It just doesn't work. If you don't know what the term is, look it up. I don't got time to explain that shit, but look it up. Anyway, MMA math don't work. RDA beat Pettis. Ferguson beat RDA. If Pettis beats Ferguson, that means MMA math don't work, and it don't work. I'm telling you that right now. You look at any division, any fighters, it don't work anywhere. You got fighters beating fighters that they've beaten, all that shit. But anyway, like I said, back to the breakdown and analysis part. The fight will be won and lost in the grappling exchanges, in my opinion. If it goes the way I think it's going to go, won and lost in the grappling exchanges. Ferguson, the way he can win in those grappling exchanges is just make it a dirty, unpredictable fight. Just make it a grueling, tiring, unpredictable fight. He needs to take a page out of RDA's book, and he needs to take a page out of Clay Guida's book. That's what he needs to do. But he really doesn't need to do that, because that's his style. And that's what makes his fight so great. And if Pettis is the fighter that I think he is, and he has a team around him that I think he does, he will address these issues, and he will not have as hard of a time with these issues. But at the same time, that's Ferguson's game. Ferguson does nothing but make it an unpredictable, dirty, grueling fight. And it's nasty. There's elbows being thrown. There's awkward shit being thrown. Any Tony Ferguson fight is more or less chaos in a Tony Ferguson fight. Seriously. And he's a hard guy to deal with. He really is. I was bringing up the records, Anthony Pettis and Tony Ferguson. When you look at the records, obviously Anthony Pettis has a more appealing resume than Tony Ferguson. But winning 10 straight in the UFC and getting better as you do it, that's extremely hard. That is extremely hard. And the motherfucker won tough. He won tough. The Ultimate Fighter. So, these guys, I want someone to talk to about this fight, because this fight is, it's such a good fight. And like I said, such a great treat before the McGregor-Khabib fight. My analysis, my breakdown, really, my point here is that Anthony Pettis can submit anyone at any time. He can knock out anyone at any time. And he can be the best lightweight fighter MMA's ever known of. Seriously, if everything goes right with Anthony Pettis, I feel like he could be the best lightweight in the world. He's got everything there. Something just needs to get flowing with him. Tony Ferguson, I truly believe, in my opinion, that Tony Ferguson might be the most well-rounded fighter in the lightweight division. More well-rounded than anyone else that I can think of off the top of my head. There's other good guys that are well-rounded, but I think Tony Ferguson, with what he's shown in his fights and with his record and what position he's in right now, that, he's just going to be, he's going to be Tony Ferguson. Just keep winning fights, keep having those grueling fights, be El Kukui, be the fucking boogeyman. He plays that role so well. I love Tony Ferguson. I love the state of the lightweight division right now. It's such a great time, such great fights, such great matchups. I can't wait till Poirier and Diaz go at it. I'll have a pre-fight, post-fight breakdown for this. Guaranteed I will have a post-fight breakdown for this fight, because I will break down every part of it. But I think it's going to be a real fight. It's going to be a real war against two guys who really are each other's kryptonite. I mean, Anthony Pettis will pot shot you with strikes and will knock you out if he can. If he can keep you at bay with his kicks and his strikes, he will try and knock you out. And I think that's what he's trying to do in all his fights. And his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game is just a backup. Tony Ferguson just wants to make it a dirty, dark fight for you. Just wants to make it grueling. Like, he lives in that grueling, painful fucking fight. I'm just excited. I can't wait. That's really all I got for this fight. I probably left some shit out, but just watch the fight. You guys will be pleased. Just watch the fight. Like I said, real treat before the Khabib McGregor fight. That fight's gonna be fucking bananas. Fucking bananas. But anyway, That's all I got for this fight. Y'all have a good night. I'll catch you on the next one. Later.